Hello, Fanimators! A quick cold open for the beginning of the show this week. This episode was recorded live at Kanpai Con in Omaha, Nebraska. Emma and I had an absolute blast at the con, and we wanted to say a huge thank you to all of you who came out to join us for the panel. If you want to hear us live, our next stop will be Convergence in Minneapolis in August. Visit our website at fanimated.weebly.com/tour for more details on that. We'd also really appreciate it if you are listening on Apple Podcasts. Be sure to rate and review the show. It really helps us out. And I love reading all the comments, so be sure to do that as well. Without further ado, here's your spoiler warning for Kiki's delivery service. Now let's get started and let's get animated. Welcome, my name is Kelly Anderson, and this is Fanimated, the animation fan podcast where we get a chance to geek out about our favorite animated media. We're going to be talking about Kiki's delivery service here in a bit, but first I just wanted to introduce ourselves. If you're unfamiliar with our podcast, my name is Kelly Anderson, I'm from Pella, Iowa, and I'm a freelance illustrator, and my favorite anime is Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Yes, we have good memories of that one together.
Yes.
We watched it together over the summer. It was magical. My name is Emma Martin. I am a freelance teaching artist in Minneapolis, Minnesota, or St. Paul, both. You know, I go back and forth. But I would say my favorite anime is probably Fairy Tail. That's just a classic for me.
So good.
Yes.
Good. So we love animation, both in film, television, anime, video games, everything. And we talked about it so much, we decided to just put a microphone in front of us and start recording. So that's kind of how our podcast came about. It's available on any podcasting sites, iTunes and Spotify and wherever you get your podcasts. So today we're talking about Kiki's delivery service.
And just to point it out there, we're not so much reviewing or critiquing. We're just geeking out together, really.
Yeah,
so
that's
you
what
can
we
geek
do.
out with us.
That's usually what we do. We talk about the stories and characters, and the production side, of course, is something that I've just always been fascinated with. Mm-hmm. And we geek out about it.
Yeah, we do. All right, should we get started?
We'll get started with Kiki's delivery service. It's a 1989 Studio Ghibli film, written, produced, and directed by Hayoa Miyazaki. Adapted from the novel of the same name by Aiko Kadono. It's about 13-year-old Kiki, a witch who, per their usual tradition, goes off on her own at the age of 13 and
a great year to be on your own.
A great year to be on your own. And tries to be independent and
training as a witch.
Trains herself as a witch,
right.
Which is like you said, maybe a questionable heritage of 13-year-olds going off
right.
on themselves, but it's great. So she uses her ability to fly to start a delivery service in the new town that she's found herself in, and meets all these fun people, gains an admirer in Tombo, the aviation nerd.
Yes.
And she just learns to live and work independently and continues to make new friends and grow as a person, which is really cool. Mm-hmm. And what I'm really excited about to have Emma here is she only just recently watched it for the first time.
This last week, actually.
So, from your perspective as an adult looking at this show, because this film is aimed towards kids, but I think adults can get a lot out of it.
Absolutely.
For sure. Like relatable, going to the grocery store and we're just going to eat pancakes for
a couple of weeks because we're poor.
Yeah. So what were your first reactions to it?
Yeah, it was a delightful and charming story to watch. I had a great time, and Kiki's just a delight of a person, so it was just really fun to engage in her story. But it was really relatable as Kiki, even though she's only 13, she experiences a lot of things that we do now in our own lives, whether that be transition. Change is hard for everybody, but we all need it, and it all helps us grow. So that was something I found really interesting, and just her just trying to find her independence and who she is as a person, and not necessarily trying to pridefully prove herself to anyone, but try to prove herself to herself, if that makes sense. Like, just like find who she is and find what she's passionate about. So it was just so fun, and to go on the adventure with her. So
yeah, absolutely. And let's dive into Kiki herself as a character.
Yes.
Again, 13-year-old witch. She's very clumsy.
Yes.
And I love that at the beginning when you're introduced to her parents, you kind of get snippets of what they're like, and you can see those things in her. And immediately that clumsiness is from her father completely, because he trips over everything.
Yeah, he's like getting ready for a camping trip and is like, oh, there goes all the stuff.
There goes all the stuff. And Kiki is just kind of haphazardly making her way through the world. But yeah, so the story focuses on her and her growing up and rise to independence. And she goes off on her journey with her friend Jiji, the black cat. Mm-hmm. So they're our main two protagonists of the film.
Yeah, and she really grows and learns a lot about herself. And what I appreciate about Kiki's character in general is that she wants to better herself, but she's not like prideful or selfish about it. She doesn't, when she sees like other young girls walking by who are doing other things that she would like to be doing as a teenager, it's not so much she's jealous and wants to like hurt them because like she can't have what they have, but she wants to be noticed for who she is and wants to be accepted. And but she's just so kind-hearted at the end of the day. One of my favorite moments in the film, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but is when she goes, one of her deliveries is to Madame, and she, the stove is broken, or like the electric stove, so she helps cook this herring and pumpkin pot pie.
And I'm like,
which
what
maybe it's good, I don't know, but it sounds kind of bad. But she helps this lady just fix her stove and work a real fire and bake the thing for her granddaughter. And she just cares so much about putting in that effort, even though it's a lot of work. She just wants to be that support.
Yeah, she has a lot of honor in that, like, she's not just going to take this woman's money for nothing. Like, she's got to do something to earn it.
She's going to put her hard work into it.
Exactly. She's very hard working.
Yes, and same thing when she has to like deliver a stuffed cat to the little birthday boy. It falls in the woods, and so she's like, Jiji, you got to be the replacement. Sorry. She's like, can I breathe? No breathing.
Breathing allowed.
It's not allowed.
And Jiji is one of the best parts of the whole film, in my opinion.
Yes, I would agree.
Absolutely brilliant. Just sarcastic and fun. And watching through it, I kind of see Jiji as like the physical representation of a lot of Kiki's immaturities. And if you watch through the entire film, you can kind of, if you're seeing it as from the lens of Jiji is voicing all of Kiki's inner thoughts, and it actually makes sense that way.
Especially since Kiki is the only one who can hear Gigi's human voice.
Exactly.
So makes sense.
And of course, by the end of the film, we don't hear Jiji at all, and Kiki can't hear him because she's grown up and she's more independent and more mature, and she's kind of lost that part of herself. But even in the little snarky things and little things that he says, kind of resonate with like that young person inside of you that's like, they're all staring at me or something, or
right.
When they're going down the street, or just like all these little things that
Jiji is so pessimistic. It just is the reason I laughed the whole film. Like, it was such a delight. Like Kelly mentioned, this was the first time I'd seen this film this last week, and Jiji was the one who was making me laugh out loud the most, because I would consider myself very optimistic as far as a personality goes.
Yes, you are.
But it's the pessimistic person that gave me life, because he would just say these wry comments, and because they're like realistic truths, and it's like sometimes that. For me personally, the optimistic person wants to take over and be like, hey, no, it's fine. But
right.
Gigi's that good dose of reality too.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, and you can tell Kiki's very just aware of herself and her appearance to other people, and she makes all these comments like she doesn't like her black dress, and she's always looking at those shoes in the mirror in the store, and
one of the parts that really sticks out to me is that she, is invited by Tombo to this party, and, she helps Madame with everything, and so she can't get there on time for him to, escort her there.
Right.
And he waits so long. It's so cute. But she's, coming back. She's soaking wet, and she sees him there, and Jiji kind of voices, like, oh, he's right there, you can go. And she doesn't, and tells Asano, like, well, I can't go anyway, like, I look like this. And Tombo wouldn't care. I'm sure no one at the party would care that she, was out in the rain. Mm-hmm. But it's just like she's
self-conscious.
She's very self-conscious, just like any
her
teenage
insecurities
girl
coming out. Mm-hmm.
would be. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Speaking of those other characters, we should go through the rest of the cast. Well, at least the more important.
The
bit.
major characters. For
yeah,
sure.
Asano is the
loveliest
best
person.
Absolutely
So
wonderful.
Yes.
She's just like what every caring, doting person should be, and like. Man, and her husband, like that baby has the best parents ever,
Really, he or she or they, whatever, they really have the best parents. I really love Asano because she is the first person that makes Kiki realize that not everybody in this new town thinks that witches are weird or strange. Like she kind of gets this first impression of like, oh, they've never seen a witch before. I'm weird. I'm an outcast. I don't belong here. But it's when we get to Asano where she's like, oh, that's so wonderful. You're a witch. That's amazing. That's incredible. And you're like, she's kind of taken aback for a moment. It's like, wow, somebody's like noticing this is good, which I think we all need that in our life. I mean, like, okay, so I graduated in theater, and let me tell you, like, every year of college, you get that question of like, hey, so what are you gonna do with that?
Yeah.
But I remember like one day when one person was just like, you're a theater major? That is so incredible. Mm-hmm. And that only happened like once in a long time. So but it was like the most incredible feeling because it's like, yeah, someone sees this gift, someone sees something that I want to pursue, and that's really amazing.
And this isn't a business podcast, but if it were, I'd say, like that small audience is what matters, and that, having that smallest viable audience that you can profit from and commune with and have this community to build. So, and I mean, Kiki's whole story is basically the starving artist's life, and it's very relatable. But it's great, and that's why I love it so much.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Asano is so supportive through it.
So supportive, and through everything, and she knows that Kiki is just a teenage girl, and she understands all those things. One of my favorite parts is that Asano like sets up after the party fiasco, sets up Tombo and her by like sending Kiki on that delivery,
right? Without letting her know who the recipient is.
And then Tombo, surprise!
Yes,
I love it. Oh,
classic
so
mom move. Way to go, mom!
Honestly. Speaking of Tombo, let's go into Tombo.
Okay.
What is there to say about Tombo? He's the biggest nerd ever, and I love him.
He's so precious. He's just a very intentional human being, and like before he even gets to know Kiki, he's like yelling thief in the street so she can get away from a cop because she was flying her broom a little fast in traffic or whatever it was. But he's just so intentional. Like he wants to like be friends with her so badly, and in my notes, I put, Tombo and Kiki's first interaction, because I loved it so much in that she's like, well, you can't talk to me unless we've been properly introduced. And Tombo was like, well, that's a little old-fashioned, isn't it?
Yeah. And he, is very opposite to Kiki in so many ways because, despite, him being a little bit of a clumsy too, he's very confident and like he, and is very, I would say mostly polite. He's just a little more forward than she is, and she is not comfortable with that at first, at least.
Right, she's used to treading the line because she wants to be confident in who she is, but she also doesn't want to be like stand out too much and be like the outcast. But Tombo just goes for it.
Yeah, and one thing that, like, obviously he cares a lot about Kiki and her, like, what captures his attention initially is that she can fly, and obviously he's obsessed with wanting to fly. That's what that's like what he wants. Totally. And I think that like during Kiki's like depression stage and when she kind of loses her powers, she's kind of afraid, like, can I hang out with Tombo because like he just likes me because I can fly, but I can't do that anymore. And I think that's just like one piece of her entire identity is kind of in this thing.
In her abilities.
In her abilities.
Yep.
Yes. And then when she loses that, you know, it feels like everything is gone.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And then let's bring in Ursula into that. So there's our other main character, and she kind of helps Kiki out of that slump.
Yes. So, as I said, Kiki comes into the slump of where she can't fly anymore and she can't hear Jiji, and she doesn't know why. She can't figure out why her powers are gone. Mm-hmm. So Ursula is like my favorite character of this whole show, and like she is so random too. She's just like this artist hanging out in the woods.
That's like the best life. I want Ursula's life, living in the woods and just drawing and painting all day, please.
I guess, but I don't understand. She's like a super outgoing person. Like I feel like she would want to be around people all the time, but you know, I don't know her personally, so I can't really say too much.
Right.
But anyway, so Ursula has met Kiki before because when she was delivering the stuffed cat, Kiki had to make a stop in there because she was beat up by the crows, basically. But when Ursula sees that Kiki is feeling down regarding the loss of her powers, she's like, let's just take a weekend. Let's go have a girls' weekend. And it's one of my favorite moments in the show because we have this analogy of Ursula as the painter saying, you know, I've been painting for a long time, and there were moments in my journey where I just couldn't paint. Like I would try and nothing would come out right. It just felt like copies of other people's work, and I just couldn't figure out what was going wrong. And Kiki is suddenly like, wow, this is relatable because I've been flying my whole life and suddenly I can't. But then she talks about how she just needed to rediscover her inspiration of why she painted. That was the biggest piece of what was missing. Mm-hmm. And I personally found that like really encouraging because I think as an artist, or in any creative art, whatever you enjoy, there are moments where you're like working and you're like, this isn't even fun anymore. Like, why am I doing this? I'm burning myself out. Like, why am I here in the first place? But just to have that reminder of like, okay, there was a reason I wanted to do this in the first place.
Yes.
And where is that spark? Where's that inspiration that made me so passionate about, for me, theater or voice acting or podcasting, you know?
Right. Yeah, and even Kiki mentions to Tombo at one point, you know, flying used to be fun before I did it for a living. Like, that's a really real thing. Like, doing something for yourself is so much different than doing it for a customer and doing it for, you know, other people. And for Kiki, she definitely, like, you know, needed, I think, that push at the end of, like, she had to really, in the moment, fly for someone else for a very significant purpose. And I think every creative art is like that. Like, you are doing it for someone else. You're serving other people by doing what you love. Mm-hmm. You know, by someone in the audience at a theater performance or someone who sees, you know, my work, it's like you are serving them in some way. And I think even though not everyone is Asano and can appreciate it, like, and recognize it, I think it's still true. And so Kiki, had to like get out of that rut, and that's kind of at least how I interpret her getting out of her depression. Is like, I need to help someone else. Like, this isn't about me.
Right.
And that's the whole movie. Like, she's self-conscious. She's thinking about herself, and it's when she's thinking about other people that it comes back to her and becomes natural again.
Right, because she doesn't realize like all the potential that she has as a person and how much she can gift that towards other people. Because we were talking about this earlier, how throughout the film she's constantly, you know, as most teenagers do, like, I don't like this dress, I don't look great, I want shoes like that, I want to be having fun like those teenagers. But throughout the film, people are constantly telling her, Kiki, you're so beautiful, and she's like, really? What?
Yeah.
And it goes to show like that that there's that insecurity there, but how she overcomes those insecurities and doubts is by not thinking so much on herself, but like putting her inspiration in someone else. Not saying that our goal is to just lean on other people for our life, but like, but we need people to do life, I guess. You know,
we're communal creatures. Like we need community, and and she has that in Asadome and Tombo and Ursula, and you need other people to get you out of a rut like that.
Mm-hmm. Especially so in the film, right before she loses her powers is when she's gone on this bike ride with Tombo, and after like sitting for a while, the other teenagers come up in the car and they're like, "Hey Tombo, come over here," and as soon as he goes over and talks to them, like she has this feeling that, I don't belong with them, like I feel like I shouldn't be here. And after that moment is when she first notices she doesn't have powers anymore. So it's that sense of like, when you are isolated, when you feel alone, like that is not healthy. It's good to be in community. I mean, just ask Elsa. Her powers went everywhere when she was isolated. So
right, exactly. And another good example of that. It's a good point. That moment was kind of the precursor to her inability to use her magic. And again, she's thinking about herself in that moment too. Like she's thinking, she's assuming that they don't want to hang out with her, or that, they're going to make fun of her or something, or anything, and she's making that assumption and making choices based off of an assumption rather than a truth. Yeah,
I think it's that those assumptions are increased because of the fact that she's a witch and not just a regular girl, because there are a lot of moments throughout the show where like she'll see outside the bakery window a girl getting on a guy's bike and driving off, or like some girls walking down the walkway with their cute clothes, it's all fashiony or whatever. And so she just wants to be a regular teenager too, and just enjoy those things. But she also wants to make her family proud and herself proud by being the best witch that she can be. So she's constantly like, going back and forth with that.
And another thing that I just thought about, that like it's another reason that maybe like she's not really connecting with these people, is like, because I think about it, and at the beginning of the film, she has a ton of friends. Like, they're all there to see her off, and they're, this gaggle of girls is all excited. Like, it seems that she's, popular. She is, good at making friends. And I think...
Popular with the guys, too, apparently.
And, like, I think part of it is just moving to a new place. Like, I mean, I don't know if you guys have felt that, like, but, we've both moved to major different cities, different states, and... It's more challenging to make friends, in a place that, you have to really try. And I think that's true as an adult, too. We both went to college, and, like, being in a college atmosphere especially, you're living with your friends. Like, it's just, you're gonna make friends with people. But as an adult, it's kind of like, oh, wait, I have to actually try? And I think that's part of Kiki's, like, maturity, too, is, like, oh, you have to really put effort into relationships to get stuff out of it. And I think she, it just takes her some time to, like, figure that out.
Definitely. And, like, by the end of the show, when the credits are rolling, you have all those snippets of all the friends she's made. Like the clock tower guy. Like, we hardly see him at all, but there he is.
But he's
like,
great.
Hey, how's it going?
Yes, absolutely. Great.
Yes.
And we, talk about, this coming of age story. And also just like, she so deeply wants to be independent, and independence is a huge theme.
Right.
But like you said, you can't do it on your own. You need other people. It's like, you need to be able to rely on people. There's like a mix there. And maturing is also realizing that.
What I do find interesting, though, about Kiki in particular is that though she's striving for independence, she's not a rebellious person. She's not a rebellious teenager. Which, that's kind of interesting to play with.
Absolutely.
Because most teenagers are like, I want to be on my own.
So they'll do rebellious things. But she's following a tradition. She is very traditional in general. And, she is doing what she can. She's making proper financial decisions for the most part. I don't think she really needed that cat mug, but at least she's not buying those shoes, right?
But it looks like Jiji, so why not?
I know. It's like special. I mean, we've all been there and done that. Like, that's my favorite character on a mug, I'm gonna buy it. Not a problem.
True.
But yeah, she isn't rebellious. She's like, really, really trying hard and really, really making the most of it.
Absolutely.
And she's vulnerable. Like, I think part of it too is not only learning to rely on other people, but also to be vulnerable and to show, all of who you are.
Mm-hmm. And through Kiki's growth of independence and learning to love herself through these different characters, I think that other characters that play a major role in the story are also impacted by her. Like, just realizing, like, maybe I should have a more open perspective about witches. I was kind of unsure about them, but I guess they're pretty cool. At least Kiki is. And
right.
Because she's on live television at the end because she's saving Tombo, and so suddenly these people who, like, the people she passed on the streets when she first came were a little hesitant sometimes because they didn't have a witch in the area. But by the end, they're like cheering her because they're like, "Wow, you saved this boy's life. Thank you."
Yes, exactly.
Though I don't think the street sweeper was too happy because he lost a broom out of it. But other than that,
well, now his broom is famous. So
that's true. Maybe his business is up and running even better than before. I don't know.
And even just mentioning the broom, I love that part too because it's kind of like another visual symbol that we have is that she's using her mother's broom, this traditional heritage piece, and then when she's in that depression, it breaks. Like, that's a huge symbolic piece. And then she gets a new one. She gets something different and something that's her own. And that's a whole other, can of worms, is that, like, she is very traditional, but she's bringing in all these new things to, create her own identity and to, become who she is and be a part of the society, in her own way.
I really love when she grabbed the new broom. It wasn't really hers, but poor man.
Well,
anyway,
it's hers now.
It's hers now, I guess. But I love the animation because she gets on it and her hair starts to, like, flow upward and, like, the bristles, like, shoot out, like, as in they're ready for fly mode. I really loved watching that part. That was really fun.
Oh, it's so good. I love it so much.
Yes. Do you want to talk further about the animation?
Yeah, so I have a few things about the production. Like I said, writer, director, producer, Hayao Miyazaki. It's the third film that Hayao Miyazaki directed, fourth Studio Ghibli film. And I say that, like, with an asterisk of, like, it would kind of be the fifth, but Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind wasn't really produced by Studio Ghibli. It was by the same people, but
it wasn't Studio Ghibli at the time, right?
It wasn't Studio Ghibli at the time. And it is
the
what
details.
Launched Studio Ghibli in the first place, though, so I still count it in the running. But
sure.
Adapted by the 1985 novel of the same name. And what's interesting is that Aiko Kodono, the author, she was not a fan of the script because the novel is like little short stories about Kiki's deliveries and all these things. Which
makes sense because it's like multiple people that she's meeting, like little episodes.
And it makes nice little episodic stories. But of course, Hayao Miyazaki is Miyazaki, so he's going to make something more, impacting about it. And created much more tension and with like the big part at the end with the
dirigible,
ship and the part where she loses her powers that we've been talking about for the last 30 minutes. Like, that's so impactful to this film. Like, that's of his design. And Kodono did not like it, and Miyazaki invited her to the studio and was able to convince her, like, no, this is actually going to be great. So thank goodness she said yes, because we have this fantastic film now. And although the previous Studio Ghibli films were successful relatively, I would count this as the first Studio Ghibli success, like box office wise, because it sold 2.64 million tickets in Japan, and that was the highest grossing film in Japan in 1989. Like, it was way, way, way more successful than Castle in the Sky, Totoro, any of them, at least upon initial release.
Right.
And again, like with Studio Ghibli, it's just kind of like one film at a time, like seeing how it goes. And this film definitely snowballed for them to make everything else. And it was originally supposed to be directed by, and I'm going to butcher this name, but, I'm trying, Sono Katabuchi, and written by Nobuyuki Ishiki. And Miyazaki did not like the original screenplay that they brought to him. And again, Miyazaki just can't leave things be. He has to get his hands dirty, and
he has to be involved in the process no matter
involved.
what. Yep.
Yes,
which I kind of love.
Oh, I totally appreciate and respect wholeheartedly. But he was
through and through.
Yes, he had to fix it, so he fixed it. He did it his own thing, and by then it was just well, I'm going to direct this now too, because.
Didn't he go back and do so he did the artwork and the script writing? Did he go back, or what did he fix particularly?
He fixed the script for sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. But he storyboards and does. I mean, he animates sequences himself. There is no part of his films that is not touched by his hand. Specifically,
right.
And that's very unusual. And we've talked about this on the podcast before. That at least in American animation, and in Japanese animation too. I mean, there's so many pieces and parts going on that, a director really has to step back and look at everything and be a part of the production process of melding all of these people and all of these talents together. Exactly. And that in and of itself is a huge job. And Miyazaki is always repeatedly well, I'm just going to go into this department and do this job for them. And again, I appreciate it.
One-man show.
He is a one-man show. I mean, if he had 2,000 years on this planet, he would make everything by himself, I'm sure.
That's true.
Anyway, so of course he ended up being the director and screenwriter of the whole thing. And so we have what we have. The city Kiki lives in is based off of European cities, architecture, and everything about it. Specifically Stockholm, because Miyazaki had been there and really, really found it inspirational. So that's kind of an interesting tidbit. And the time period is this make-believe 1950s where World War II didn't happen, which I also find interesting. Which is also
really intriguing.
Part of Miyazaki's overarching themes of, not a fan of war and totally pacifist, and which is great. So, and I think it's interesting too, looking at the time period. It is very, it feels very fantastical, because there is a witch, but it also feels very real. She loves this radio, and she all the technologies that are about, and
or the whole ordeal with the dirigible coming to town and everybody being fascinated with that.
Yes, absolutely. Side note, I totally wish I could just fly in a dirigible like that.
That would be pretty cool.
That would be fascinating. I wish that was a mode of transportation that people wouldn't have now. A few other things just about the English dub is that there were two versions of the English dub. The original was much different, so they changed the beginning and ending soundtracks to English music. And they also, in general, in both of those English dub versions, Jiji is much more cynical and sarcastic, but we appreciate that. Love it. And in Japanese culture, a cat's gonna, they just assume a cat to be more feminine, and so there's a
woman who
plays Jiji in the original Japanese, and obviously he's played by. Do you know the name of the actor?
Oh man, I don't know offhand, but I remember
You're disappointing me.
I'm sorry.
You're supposed to know everything about
I'm supposed to be on check with voice actors, but not.
But he's great, and he does a great job. And before we go to the voice actors,
yeah, of course.
The other thing I find interesting, and I've talked about on the podcast before about Princess Mononoke, is that the original dub, English dub, had way less music sound effects in certain scenes. Or way more, excuse me, because the Japanese original film doesn't. There are parts where there's no sound at all. And
us Americans hate silence.
Us Americans hate silence. We always need a whole bunch of stuff and music. And one of my favorite parts is the end where she's saving Tombo, and
it's completely silent. Yeah.
Everything cuts out because it's this communal, holding your breath.
Yes.
Hoping that drama. It's gonna be fine, and then it is.
Right.
So just another note on that again, English dub. And the current English dub, the newer one, does have those sound effects removed and music taken out. So it is more like the original, but just another tidbit. So
awesome.
As
far as the voice actors go, just a couple to note is that Kirsten Dunst plays Kiki, and I found that to be a delight because Kirsten Dunst was like one of my role models growing up because if any of you have seen the old Little Women with Winona Ryder in it, she played Amy, the youngest daughter, and I just thought she was so fun. You know, she's this young girl who wants to be a painter and is an aspiring artist, and she was super bubbly, so I related to her because I've been a drama queen my whole life. And she was just so fun to watch, and then like also in later films as well. So when I turned on the movie, like hearing her voice, I was like, oh my goodness, Kirsten Dunst, like what? You did like animation? Like this is awesome. Another shout out is to the lady who plays Madame, so the old woman that Kiki goes to and helps with the pie, is played by the infinite Debbie Reynolds. Lovely Broadway and film star. I just absolutely love her because one of my favorite musicals is Singin' in the Rain, and so she's a gem. But anyway, great voice cast overall. Like, I'm sorry I can't remember the name of Jiji, but he was just hilarious. Like, I couldn't get enough of it. The last side note I wanted to address was, so I have this thing where I just always listen for voices in particular when I'm watching an animated film. Like,
and she has a really good ear for it. Okay, I'll be watching something or playing a video game or whatever, and you're immediately like, that's the voice of this person and that thing, and I'm like, I didn't notice, but
yeah, they fascinate me, so I like to pick those things up. But
it's great. It's a talent
but yet
that you have.
it's not always a talent, as I forgot the name of the guy who plays Jiji. But anyway, so as we're watching the film, it goes to a scene where there's this little boy who's having his birthday, and he spoke, and I was like, man, I really know that voice. Who is that voice? And at first I thought like it was one of the twins from Ouran Academy High School Host Club, if you watched that anime, but it wasn't. I was like, oh, but it's very similar. Where have I heard this voice? So the voice of the little boy is played by Pamela Adlon, and I looked through her IMDb, and a lot of them were familiar, like movies and TV shows, but nothing that like really stood out of like, oh yeah, that's where I heard it. But I scrolled down a couple of years back, and my brother, he has like the whole Scooby-Doo collection from like the oldest ones to the newest ones. Awesome. So right in the middle, where there's the What's New Scooby-Doo series, the What's New Scooby-Doo coming after you, when it gets to that series, there was one episode where they're at this roller coaster park, and everything's wreaking havoc because of this monster. And there's this little red-haired freckled boy named Eddie, and he wants everybody to think that he's the monster, or he's the one behind it all, but he's not. And that was the voice that I remembered.
From one episode of Scooby-Doo.
From a long time ago. It's just like I hear a voice, I'm like, oh, I have to remember where it came from. So that was just kind of a treat. I was like, I remember watching that as a kid. That's just a crazy connection.
And in general, I think like English dubs for anime, it's like a pretty small actor pool, actor community, and so you quite frequently run into the same voices, which is always like a little present. Like, oh, that's so-and-so.
Well, because even some of the voice actors who are doing panels here at the con, like, they're just like, oh, yeah, I've been in 240 plus shows, so which one are you talking about? I'm like, well, how about, like, just like, which one do I start with? Because there's a lot of voice actors who will just do, like, additional voices, like, in the background.
There's a lot of voices, and so much media needs voices, and
even just for like background noise or something like that.
Not just film, but like so many television shows, and there's so many anime nowadays that's like, they need a lot. They need a lot of voices and video games and everything. So It's really fascinating. There's a lot there.
So Kelly, can you tell me about like one of your favorite moments in the film?
Yeah. Okay. We've talked a lot about a few of my favorites, like when she comes back. Soaking wet and wanted to go to the party, she doesn't. And obviously the end where she saves Tombo, super one of my faves. But something like really small that I really like is when she is flying at night, and it's full moon, so it's like perfect clear weather and everything. And then of course the rain starts pouring down, and she has to find shelter. So she just finds a train to like hide down on. And first off, I like read all of the Boxcar Children, so I was like, train. So I was obsessed with that. And also just like the idea of sleeping in hay was always like a cool, but it's not like personally, like my family has like animals and horses, and straw and hay is not comfortable. Like, but it always looks so comfy, and so like I go out and be like, this is not comfortable if I tried that myself.
It's like how Studio Ghibli makes every food look delicious on their films. Like
everything
the same way. Yeah, I want to cuddle up in hay. Like
but it's not comfortable. So anyway, I always just liked that idea of like snuggling in this hay and being like safe and warm from the outside cold, and being woken up by cows, maybe not so much, but just the idea of that is always good. Yeah. So what about you? Anything we haven't mentioned yet?
That one of my favorite moments that we didn't mention is when Kiki's first starting her delivery service, and the baker and his wife are like so accommodating with giving her a room and giving her service and like meeting her needs. I love that the baker, the husband, he makes a sign for Kiki in their window.
It's
just
cute.
So precious. I appreciate him so much because he doesn't say a word during this whole film.
He says like 2-3 words the whole time.
The most precious person ever. He like cares. He like has a stern like outlook, but he's like the most gentle, caring person ever. And like he'll like whip over like pans of rolls, and Gigi's like, whoa, like, this is a master. But I really loved that moment of where he made the little sign for her, just like to get her on her career start.
I love it. And he's like waiting for her to come back, like to see the sign, and then he sees that she's coming. He runs back into the back room, and it's like, he comes back out like, no big deal. But it's like, okay, you care a lot, dude.
Another funny part is when Kiki like first wakes up and she has to run across the yard to go to the bathroom.
Oh, yes.
And she sees the baker coming, and she's like, no, I gotta stay in the bathroom longer.
Right. She's like,
which I find so ironic because she's got like a full-length nightgown on, but she's riding her broom all over the city with her drawers showing. So like, what, girl, where are your priorities? Like,
what's the level here of modesty that's happening?
Yes.
It's so good. It's so good. Anything else you want to mention about Kiki's delivery service?
It's just a great film. It's just absolutely charming.
Definitely see it.
I loved it.
We still have a few more minutes though, and the thing we like to do at the end of our podcast is to just ask, what are you watching or playing right now that you would recommend?
Absolutely. Okay, so what I am watching right now is My Hero Academia.
Yes.
It's a popular one. You've probably seen some characters walking around.
There's
it's just
some
so
great
fun.
cosplayers at this con right now.
Yes,
it's fantastic.
It's just so fun and so beautiful, and I just love Deku and Otaku. I'm like the captain of this podcast. I'm all about them ships, so
that's Emma's role.
That is my role.
Always aware of every
that's what I'm watching, and then I'm also slowly but surely playing Zelda Breath of the Wild.
Finally, I got her to play Breath of the Wild.
It's a little difficult. I just like go over to her house. I'm like, all right, it's time. So
it's time.
It's just a great video game. Such a blast.
It's true. I've got a podcast about Breath of the Wild coming out shortly, so keep an eye out for that. I finally watched Vinland Saga, and I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but please go watch it. If you listen to this podcast at all, I think I mentioned How to Train Your Dragon like in every episode. But
she's a big fan.
I'm a big fan, and I just like have all this knowledge about Viking history for no reason at all. And so Vinland Saga is this great anime about Vikings in like 1000 AD, and the conquering England, and it's Vikings actually, raiding and pillaging villages, not, making friends with dragons. But it's absolutely fantastic, and give me a Viking boy that's trying to make his father proud, and boom, instant success in my book. Like, that's great. So highly recommend it if you haven't seen it already. So yeah, I think that's about it for us. We want to thank you all so much for coming and
geeking out with us.
Geeking out with us. Yes, that's what this podcast is all about, just geeking out about animation. We have some stickers for you guys for showing up and joining us. So please make sure you grab one of those. And
some business cards, too. If you want to look us up, we're on wherever you get your podcasts.
Wherever you get your podcasts. That's where we're at. And again, thanks for coming and have a great con.
Thanks so much for listening, and again, thank you to everyone who joined us at Kanpai Con. It was super fun, and we're very excited for Convergence in August. Let us know your thoughts on Kiki's delivery service or any of your other favorite animated media on Facebook and Instagram at Fanimated Podcast. You can also email us at fanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. The art for this podcast is done by myself, and you can find my Instagram at KanderDraw. That's KanderDraw. The music is provided by Purple Planet Music, and a huge thank you to Emma for joining me on this little road trip adventure. We've got some awesome episodes coming up, and I can't wait to share them with you. In the meantime, stay tuned and stay animated.
Go ahead and say stuff.
Well, hello, I am Emma Martin, and today we are going to be doing a podcast for Fanimated. I'm so excited to be another co-host once again. I love co-hosting on this podcast as we get to geek out about animation. It's the best. Have y'all seen The Dragon Prince? It's pretty great. Rail is on my shirt because she's my favorite. She's basically my spirit animal.